Let me ask you something. How many of you have ever built the perfect strategy on paper, the step-by-step plan, the blueprint, the funnel, the ads, and still felt like your business hit a ceiling? Be honest. See, strategy looks sexy. Strategy makes you feel productive. You can map out every detail on a whiteboard and convince yourself you're scaling. But here's the truth. Strategy alone will never get you there, because scaling isn't about what's written on a page. It's about what's alive inside of you, your team, your culture, your psychology. That's what fuels execution. That's what drives momentum. Think about it. If strategy alone created growth, then everyone who ever bought a business course would be crushing it right now, but they're not. Why? Because knowledge without energy, without belief, without relentless follow through, dies in the notebook. Tonight, I want to shake that pattern in you. I want to challenge the way you've been taught to build, because once you understand the force that actually scales a business, you'll never look at strategy the same way again. Listen to me. The moment you believe that a plan on paper is the same thing as a breakthrough in the real world, you handcuff your business to the slow lane. That belief is comforting. It's neat. It allows you to sleep at night because you can point to a spreadsheet and say, we have a strategy. But here's the raw truth. Comfort doesn't scale. Only intensity does. Only clarity married to massive, relentless action moves the needle. If you want to interrupt the pattern that's been holding you back, you have to start with a jolt, a sudden, honest reckoning that the thing you've been worshiping isn't the engine you think it is. Think about how humans react to anything that's safe and familiar. We rationalize, we delay, we perfect the plan instead of launching it. We polish the slide deck until the edges are rounded and the deck gleams, and then we treat the deck like the product. But the market doesn't care about your polished slides. The market cares about what you make happen. The difference between people who scale and those who tinker forever is not intelligence or even the quality of the idea. It's the capacity to create velocity. Velocity comes from energy. Velocity comes from a relentless refusal to accept almost as sufficient. So let's break a myth right now. Having a strategy is necessary, but it is not sufficient. You can memorize the playbook, recite the metrics in your sleep, and still fail to create momentum, because momentum is not a metric on a dashboard. Momentum is a force generated by people who believe, and belief spreads faster than logic. If your team doesn't believe in the mission with their whole bodies, your strategy will be a ghost, visible but without weight. You can't move a mountain with a blueprint. You move a mountain with people who will pick up shovels at dawn again and again, no matter how sore their hands. Now, imagine walking into your team meeting and dropping this bomb. We've built a strategy that's brilliant, but it's not enough. Watch the room. Watch the discomfort. Watch the way eyes shift. That moment is a pattern interrupt. It wakes people up. It forces a question. Are we going to hide behind clever plans, or are we going to do the heavy work of creating a culture where execution is sacred? Because the truth is, execution is an ecosystem. It's the rituals, the feedback loops, the tiny wins that compound. It's the way you celebrate progress and the way you confront failure without pointing fingers. Execution is a human system. And human systems respond to leadership that is present, contagious, and uncompromising. Energy is contagious. If you walk in tired, your team will mirror that. If you walk in with a half-hearted, let's try this attitude, your strategy will be treated like a suggestion, not a mandate. But if you embody urgency, if your voice cracks with conviction and your actions scream priority, people move. It's not theatricality for its own sake, it's physics. Human beings need a signal that this matters more than the other 1,000 distractions pulling at them. Your role as a leader is to deliver that signal, not once, but over and over until the signal becomes a habit. And here's something most leaders don't admit fear masquerades as strategy. We need more data. We need more analysis. Those are polite ways of saying, I'm afraid to risk being wrong. But growth is violent. It demands decisions made with imperfect information, made quickly, and iterated on ruthlessly. Strategy reduces risk by mapping options. Execution reduces risk by creating options. When you act, you create new possibilities that only action can reveal. When you remain stuck in planning, your options remain hypothetical, sterile, untested, and useless. So how do you generate that initial jolt? You speak plainly. You set a time frame that feels impossible. You pick a metric that everyone understands and you make it a sacred target. You remove the fluff. You make the first 90 days unbearable for mediocrity because pressure reveals character. Pressure separates talkers from doers. Under pressure, strategies get real or they die. And when strategies die quickly, they free up space for experiments that actually work. Remember, humans are pattern creatures. We latch onto rhythms. If your rhythm is hesitation, your company's heartbeat will be slow and weak. If your rhythm becomes rapid execution, your company's heart will pound, oxygen will flood the muscles, and growth will become an emergent property of your culture. The plan is your compass. Execution is the engine. Without an engine, the compass is decorative. Without a compass, the engine runs without direction. The magic happens when you fuse both, when you become the kind of leader who refuses to settle for pretty plans and insists on the messy, loud, relentless work of making them happen. Ask this one question and watch the room change. What would you do tomorrow if you knew you could not fail? Say it slowly with weight, and you'll see heads tilt, lips part, 1,000 tiny futures flicker across faces. That's the power of a thought-provoking question. It doesn't just ask for information, it pulls people out of autopilot and drops them into possibility. Questions are not neutral. They act like magnets for attention, emotion, and meaning. The right question cracks the shell of everyday thinking and forces people to feel something real. When you want to hook an audience, when you want to pry open stubborn habits and get to the root of why they act the way they do, you start with a question that lands like a pebble in a still pond and sends ripples everywhere. A truly potent question doesn't ask for facts, it asks for identity. It doesn't seek a checkbox, it invites a confession. Ooh, here is settling for what's comfortable instead of chasing what's possible. That kind of question pulls people into their own story. It triggers memory and accountability and a little heat behind the eyes because we all have a private ledger of the compromises we've made. When you ask for identity, who they believe they are, what they're willing to tolerate, you move them from thinking about tactics to interrogating their values. And once values are on the table, behavior is no longer a technical problem. It's a human one, and human problems are solved with emotion, connection, ritual, and accountability, not spreadsheets. Tone matters more than you think. Ask the same question softly, and it might be polite curiosity. Ask it with conviction, with a hitch in your voice, and it becomes an invitation to transformation. Pace is your ally. Pause before the question to draw attention, deliver the question clean and spare, then hold silence like a drumbeat. Silence is not empty. It is the space you give people to answer themselves. After the silence, repeat the question in a shortened, sharper form so it echoes. Repetition moves ideas from the head into the chest. Use contrast. Ask them what they are doing today. Then ask what they would do if the rules changed. Make them compare present reality to a possibility that jolts them. That contrast creates cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable, fertile ground where decisions are born. Emotion is the currency of action. When you craft your question, design it to pull at an emotion that will fuel movement. Curiosity, indignation, longing, or fear of missing out on a version of life they secretly want. Questions that surface regret are especially powerful because regret is a stronger motivator than hope for many people. Try this. If you look back 1 year from now, what would you be ashamed not to have tried? It's blunt, it's personal, and it forces a reckoning. But don't weaponize shame, use it to convert numbness into urgency. The goal is to make the cost of an action visible so action becomes the less painful option. Questions also create alignment. Instead of lecturing your team about KPIs, ask which one metric, if it doubled, would fundamentally change your life. That flips the conversation from compliance to ownership. When people have to pick that metric, they reveal their priorities and you get clarity about what actually matters. Ownership births accountability. People will defend and fight for what they choose. When a team names the target, they stop treating strategy as someone else's homework and start treating execution as their fight. Be strategic about who answers and how. Invite a volunteer to respond to the question and then amplify their answer. Use the first few responses as anchors, short, real, emotionally honest examples that validate others' inner thoughts. If the room is silent, call on someone gently. People will often surprise themselves with courage once the first voice breaks the ice. Frame the question so the answer cannot be faked. Don't allow platitudes, push for specifics. Tell me one thing you will do differently this week is better than will you take action? Because specifics require commitment. Finally, remember that questions are not one-off tricks. They are cultural tools. Use them to build rituals. Start meetings with a single question that reconnects the team to purpose, or open a launch with a question that forces customers to examine their dissatisfaction. The right question repeated in the right rhythm becomes part of your company's nervous system, a persistent probe that keeps everyone awake to what's possible and intolerable. When your questions demand more from people than they expect to give, they either rise to meet them or reveal the gaps you need to fill as a leader. Picture this: two co-founders, same city, same industry, same dreams. Both have stacks of notebooks filled with charts, a Trello board that looks like a NASA mission plan, and a consultant's binder with fancy diagrams. One nights his computer at 2 a.m., hair on end, convinced that a little more market research will unlock the secret. The other wakes at 5 a.m., scripts an email to investors, and schedules 3 cold calls before coffee. On paper, they look identical: brilliant strategies, elegant funnels, meticulously planned launch calendars. But in 6 months, their dashboards tell 2 very different stories. One's conversion rate is flat. Cash runway shrinks week by week, and team morale is a slow leak. The other is sprinting, iterating, getting customers, failing fast, and learning faster. What changed? Not the strategy. Both had plans. What changed was the work, the messy, loud, imperfect execution that never lives on a slide deck. Now imagine the first founder in a boardroom presenting the perfect playbook. We will optimize our funnel, improve targeting, and increase average order value. The slides are beautiful. Everyone nods. They high five. Then the meeting ends and the pause pulls the air out of the room. Someone says, "Who's going to own the outreach?" Silence. Someone else asks, "What if the data's wrong?" More silence. The plan, elegant and complete, becomes a comfort blanket. It's safe to talk about next quarter's KPIs and safe to defer the hard decision about who will actually pick up the phone, call the customer, ship the imperfect prototype, or fire the underperforming partner. Strategy gives the illusion of progress. It scratches the itch of productivity without producing the scar tissue of real effort. Real businesses aren't built in pristine environments. They survive in scale and noisy, ambiguous markets where assumptions die daily. The entrepreneurs who get stuck worship the perfect plan as if it were a talisman against risk. They keep adding contingencies, reworking timelines, and waiting for a signal that will never arrive. Meanwhile, competitors who are less polished but more relentless are testing headlines, launching MVPs, asking customers direct questions, and adjusting their offer in real time. They're not scared to lose a sale if it means learning why the sale was lost. They understand that momentum is an operational muscle, and you only build muscle by exertion, not by reading anatomy textbooks. There's also a human element that strategy cannot capture: the friction of real teams. On paper, roles flow cleanly and ownership is explicit. In reality, people have fear, bias, competing priorities, and lives. When a strategy is handed down from an ivory tower, it's easy for people to treat it like a suggestion. Humans perform differently when they have agency. The stuck founder often forgets to translate the plan into everyday rituals and clear responsibilities. They don't set the small, non-negotiable behaviors that convert intention into habit. They forget to create the microscopic feedback loops that show progress in real time. So when a week passes and the metric hasn't moved, everyone shrugs and blames externalities. Execution fails not because the strategy is wrong, but because the human architecture needed to enact it was never built. Then there's the tyranny of perfection. Waiting until everything is perfect is the silent killer of startups. Perfectionism dresses itself as prudence. We'll launch when the product is pristine. But the market doesn't reward pristine. It rewards relevance. 1,000 imperfect customers telling you what they actually want are worth more than a year of internal polishing. The entrepreneurs who are stuck treat customer feedback as a validation checklist instead of a living conversation. They hold tightly to their initial assumptions, and when customers push back, they reinterpret the feedback to fit the plan rather than letting the market rewrite the plan. Money plays a role too. Investors and founders often equate a detailed strategy with lower risk, but capital is short-term. Execution converts that capital into velocity. An investor can be patient with a clear, noisy test that produces fast learnings. They cannot tolerate months of immaculate planning that results in no customer traction. Cash is the thermometer of reality. If a strategy does not produce immediate micro experiments that test the riskiest assumptions, the runway will reveal the strategy's impotence. Finally, consider the emotional toll. Entrepreneurs who live in planning mode are exhausted by the mental burden of maintaining one perfect future while ignoring the messy present. That constant tension breeds paralysis. It's easier to craft another slide than to have a brutally honest conversation with a difficult customer, to pivot a feature, or to let go of a co-founder who is draining culture. Execution requires discomfort. Strategy allows you to avoid it. That avoidance becomes structural. The company's cadence slows, decisions stack up, and the organization learns to wait. Waiting becomes the default, and waiting kills momentum quietly and thoroughly. If you want people to move, you can't talk like you're reading a manual. You have to talk like your body is already in the next room, dragging everyone with it. Words are important, but the real lever is physical intensity. The way you stand, the space you take, the pauses you carve out, the pace you push. Start with stancy, feet planted, shoulders open, chest forward. Small changes in posture change chemistry. Your voice will follow your body. Your presence will follow your posture. When you own your space, people feel the permission to lean in. Use short lines like punches. Long sentences lull people into comfort. Short sentences create impact. Say one thing at a time. Pause. Let the air hold the idea. Then hit them with another short line. Not every sentence needs to be clever. Many need to be sharp. Decide. Pause. Execute. Pause. Repeat. That rhythm becomes a drumbeat that the audience can't ignore. It's primitive and human. The brain lights up at pattern and cadence. Give them a cadence they can follow and they will march. Call and response is a secret weapon. It's not showmanship, it's participation. Ask a question and give people a way to answer physically or verbally. Who here wants to double their revenue? Wait. Let the hands go up. Let the room breathe. Then make them answer in a way that commits them out loud. Shout yes if you refuse to accept small thinking. Use that sound as fuel. When the room responds, you've converted passive listeners into actors. That tiny act of saying something aloud makes the idea real in their bodies. Use repetition. Ask, they answer. You repeat their answer louder. They shout it back. Now that idea lives in them, not just your presentation. Gesture with intention. Don't wave like you're fanning a quiet room. Use strong, meaningful gestures. Point when you need accountability. Open palms when you invite collaboration. Bring your hands to your heart when you want empathy to cut through logic. Move your hand across the chest to create a "this is ours" moment. Use levels drop low to show humility. Rise high to claim vision. When your gestures match the sentence, the brain anchors the idea to movement. People remember motion better than words. Voice dynamics are non-negotiable. Vary volume and pitch like a musical instrument. Drop your voice for gravity, raise it for urgency. Break sentences into fragments if you want to create suspense. Speed up when you're describing momentum. Slow down when you want people to feel the weight of what you're saying. And for God's sake, breathe. Fill your lungs before the big line. Nothing kills intensity faster than breathless delivery. When you breathe loudly and clearly, you give the room permission to be bigger. Use proximity strategically. Get closer at the moment you want connection. Step back when you want reflection. Movement toward people lowers barriers. Movement away creates space for thought. If you're on a stage, don't hide behind a podium. Walk into the audience, make eye contact, lock in for a beat. Eye contact is an amplifier. Hold it for slightly longer than you think comfortable. The person you lock onto will feel seen, and others will follow their lead. Silence is one of the most powerful tools in your kit. After a punchline, wait. Let the silence sit. People will fill it with their own interpretation and energy. Silence gives weight to the words that came before it. It's not awkward if you own it. Count to 3 in your head. In performance terms, that's an eternity. Use silence like a lens that zooms in on the idea you've just planted. Physical anchors are underrated. Choose a gesture, a word, or a stance and pair it with a promise. Every time you use that anchor, you trigger the same psychological response. Think of it like pressing a button. The first time you do it, you charge the button with meaning. The second time you press it, the room feels the echo. Leaders use anchors to signal urgency, clarity, or decision. Use them sparingly and they become powerful cues for action. Match content to movement. Big visionary statements deserve wide gestures. Sweep and arcs, open chest. Tactical calls to action deserve pointed, crisp movements. A finger, a step forward, a directive gaze. When you tell someone to take a risk, mirror that risk in your posture. Step forward physically when you ask them to step forward in life. The congruence between message and motion is the bridge to trust. Finally, cultivate contagion. Intensity is not theater if it's authentic. Start small practice in meetings. Use short, punchy phrases. Demand a response and celebrate the noise. Train your team to reply when asked, to stand when challenged, to speak truth aloud. The rituals you build will become the company's muscle memory. Once intensity is normalized, strategy stops being a concept on paper and becomes a force that moves through people, generating the velocity you need to scale. There is a promise that changes everything. Not a promise you write down and forget, but a living promise that you feel in your chest the moment you walk into the room. When I say there's something deeper than strategy that unlocks scale, I'm not offering a metaphor. I'm naming the engine that either multiplies your efforts or quietly eats them alive. Strategy is the map. The deeper thing is the force that compels people to move on the map, to march through storms, to show up when spreadsheets say they shouldn't. It's the promise of conviction, and conviction is what turns plans into progress. Conviction is contagious. It begins with a leader who refuses to tolerate mediocrity, who treats the mission as sacred, not optional. When a leader communicates a promise with muscle, not just words, but repeated behaviors, it lands in the nervous systems of the team. People stop asking permission to act and instead ask permission to be bolder. That shift is subtle at first. Fewer, let's table it, moments, more, let's ship it and learn responses. Over time, it becomes the culture's reflex. Strategy without that reflex sits on a shelf. Strategy with it becomes a living thing. The promise you make must be specific and non-negotiable. We will deliver value every week is different from we will be the most trusted partner in our customers' lives. The first is tactical. The second is a standard that shapes every decision. Standards are the scaffolding of scale. They tell people what to prioritize when the noise turns up and resources tighten. Standards also create boundaries. They eliminate the endless debates about trivial optimizations and force focus on what actually moves the needle. When standards are clear, people can make decisions without waiting for someone else to tell them what to do. Rituals are how promises become muscle memory. You won't scale by telling people to care. You'll scale by building tiny practices that require care. Start meetings with a one-line commitment. Track one metric that matters. Celebrate one small win publicly and create a ritual for fast failure. What did we test? What did we learn? What do we change? Rituals convert lofty commitments into daily acts. They are the bridge from intention to habit. Habits compound, and compounding is the quiet multiplier of growth, far more powerful than a brilliant quarterly plan that never leaves the deck. Belief beats competence when the market gets tough. Competence is critical, yes. You need skills, systems, and processes. But belief is the oxygen for competence. When belief saturates a team, people find creative ways to solve impossible problems. They pick up slack outside their job descriptions, and they stay when other options look easier. Belief is built through stories. Tell the story of the customer you saved. The night someone stayed late to debug a problem, the call that turned a skeptic into a fan. Those stories become folklore. Folklore becomes identity. Identity becomes the reason people stay and fight for the company when growth plateaus. Execution systems matter too, but they must be designed to channel the promise. Create tight feedback loops, make decisions visible, and assign ownership to single people who cannot pass the ball. Incentives should align with the promise. If your promise is speed, reward speed. If your promise is trust, reward transparency and reliability. Systems without alignment become bureaucracy. Alignment without systems becomes wishful thinking. The trick is to design processes that force choices consistent with the promise so that every sprint ends with a clear idea of whether you're honoring what you said you would do. Finally, the promise is not a one-time speech. It's repeated, reinforced, and refined. You test it in the marketplace and in the bar room conversations of your team. You watch where it falters and you fix the small mechanisms that allow people to deliver on it. You don't protect the promise from reality. You expose it to reality so it becomes stronger. When your promise is alive, strategy becomes a tool, not a talisman, a means to serve a deeper insistence that unites decisions, behavior, and heart into a single forward motion that creates the kind of scale you can't fake.